The ocean has a way of lulling you into a false sense of security. One minute it's a calm, sapphire blue playground, the next it's an unforgiving force of nature. Jessica Radcliffe knew this better than most. She was a marine biologist, a true adventurer at heart, someone who felt more at home in the salty spray of the sea than on dry land. She had spent years studying the intricate dance of life beneath the waves, documenting everything from the smallest coral to the most majestic of whales. It was a perfect morning off the coast of British Columbia. Her small, sturdy research vessel, the Wanderer, bobbed peacefully on the water. Her mission for the day was simple: collect water samples and observe the feeding patterns of local seal populations. Jessica prepped her gear with the practiced efficiency of a seasoned professional. The plan was to take a shallow dive near a kelp forest. As she slipped over the side of the boat and into the cool embrace of the ocean, a sense of peace washed over her. Down here, there was only the sound of her own breathing and the gentle, rhythmic sway of the kelp. This was her sanctuary. But the tranquility was a fragile illusion. Deep in the shadows, something immense and powerful was moving. The descent was mesmerizing. Sunlight filtered through the water, schools of shimmering silver fish darted past her, moving as one organism. She began her work, carefully collecting samples and making notes on her waterproof slate. Her movements were slow and deliberate, designed to cause as little disturbance as possible. Suddenly, a change in the environment pricked at her senses. The smaller fish, which had been flitting about so freely, vanished in an instant. The water grew still and a deep, resonant vibration pulsed through it. Every instinct she had honed over years in the wild screamed that something was wrong. Then she saw it, a colossal shape emerging from the hazy depths, a living torpedo of black and white. It moved with an unnerving combination of grace and raw power. Its dorsal fin, tall and straight like a warrior's blade, sliced the water above. For a moment Jessica was frozen, not by fear but by sheer awe. She raised her camera. But the orca wasn't just passing by, it changed course. The whale's eye, intelligent and ancient, locked onto hers. It was a gaze that held no malice, just a chilling, calculating focus. This wasn't a curious pass. This was an approach with intent. Jessica realized with a gut-wrenching certainty that the orca had mistaken her for prey. In her black wetsuit she likely resembled a seal, a primary food source for this apex hunter. The dream had become a nightmare in the blink of an eye, and the abyss was closing in. The orca closed the distance in seconds. The first hit wasn't a bite, but a powerful, deliberate ram. The force was immense, knocking the air from her lungs and sending her spiraling through the water. Her dive mask was ripped from her face. Before she could even begin to process what had happened, the orca was on her again. This time its massive jaws closed around her leg. She heard a sickening crunch as the orca's teeth, each one as thick as her thumb, clamped down. She let out a scream, but it was lost to the water, turning into a useless torrent of bubbles. The orca began to shake her violently, thrashing her back and forth like a dog with a chew toy. Fight or flight kicked in, but there was nowhere to flee. So she fought. With her free limbs, she began to pummel the orca's massive head. She aimed for its eye, the one sensitive spot she could think of. The water around her began to cloud with her own blood, a crimson plume blooming in the blue. Then came the drag. The orca, still holding her leg in its vice-like grip, began to pull her down, deeper and deeper into the abyss. The pressure in her ears became excruciating, and her lungs burned for air. The beautiful sunlit world above grew more distant, a shimmering mirage of safety she might never reach again. Panic set in as she realized the orca was trying to drown her, a common tactic used on seals. In that dark, crushing descent she felt a profound and terrifying understanding of her place in the natural order. She was no longer a scientist observing nature, she was simply food. In those terrifying moments as she was being dragged into the crushing depths, Jessica's mind raced. Thoughts flickered through her consciousness. She thought of her family. She thought of the sun on her face. But amidst the panic, a strange clarity emerged. She knew that giving up meant certain death. A stubborn, resilient part of her refused to surrender. She had to survive. She wasn't going to die here. Not today. Perhaps it was her frantic struggling, or perhaps the orca realized its mistake. Abruptly, the pressure on her leg was released. The orca paused. Its colossal form hovered beside her. Then it turned and disappeared into the deep blue. For a split second, Jessica floated in shock. Her body was numb. Then the pain returned with a vengeance. Her training kicked in. Survival mode. Her leg was a mangled mess. A trail of blood followed her every move. Kicking with her good leg, she began a desperate one-legged ascent toward the light. Black spots danced in her vision. The surface seemed impossibly far away. Gasping, she finally breached the surface. She took a desperate lungful of air. The wanderer bobbed a few hundred feet away. Pulling herself onto the deck was the hardest thing she'd done. She collapsed bleeding and broken, but alive under the warm, indifferent sun. The aftermath of the attack was a blur of pain rescue recovery where surgeons worked for hours to save her leg. The physical scars would be a permanent reminder, but the psychological impact was even more profound. During her long recovery, she had a lot of time to reflect on what had happened. She felt no anger towards the orca. It was not a malicious monster. It was a hunter that had made a simple, yet nearly fatal mistake. She was in its territory, its kitchen, and she fit the profile of its next meal. This harrowing experience reinforced a lesson she had always known but now understood on a visceral level. We are not masters of the natural world. We are merely participants, and often we are vulnerable ones. Wild animals, especially apex predators, operate on instinct honed over millennia. For anyone venturing into the wild, whether on land or at sea, first, always be aware of your surroundings. Notice the small changes, the behavior of smaller animals, the sounds, the silence. These are nature's warning signs. Second, if you find yourself in a dangerous encounter, don't panic. Fight back. Make yourself seem like a difficult, undesirable target. While she did eventually return to the water, it was with a newfound humility and a deeper respect for the creatures that call it home. Her story teaches us to admire these intelligent predators from a safe distance, to understand their world, but to never forget that we are visitors there. Respect its power, know your limits, and always have a survival plan. That's how you live to tell the tale.